Today's webinar looks at standards and innovation in the area of data spaces, and it's organized in collaboration with the Open and Agile Smart Cities, OASC. So OASC is a global network of communities that assists local administrations in their digital transformation. So today, and thank you for joining us, today we'll be looking at different aspects of standards and innovation in data spaces. We'll be looking at legislation, European aspects, international aspects, standardization priorities, and how you can get involved as well, and where the priorities are. So if you're having your lunch, then please enjoy it, and I hope that the speakers who you can see along the top can enjoy their lunch as well, maybe with their microphones off. So as a participants, you'll not have to worry about that, but you can put your questions, etc., in the Q&A box. So just to say that we have over 60 registrants, which is fantastic, and over 50% are female as well, which is really good and not the norm for a standardization webinar, I have to say. So we're really very pleased about that. We have a number of projects. I think we have around 15 or 16 EU-funded projects, and we have a mix of people from the research side, from standardization, people who work in standardization, people who work in research and innovation in general, and also people from an industry as well. So we're really pleased with the mix that we've got as well today. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, please, Anna. So in the webinar today, we'll be really looking at how data spaces in Europe can drive data-driven innovation and accelerate digital transformation of business and organizations across Europe, providing secure and efficient data exchange, and also addressing data sovereignty and privacy concerns. So data spaces are being a lot of investment in these data spaces from the European Union, and this is obviously an important topic. But standardization, of course, has a role to play, and a crucial role in ensuring comparability and compatibility and interoperability across the different data spaces. And we'll be looking closely at this topic. So we have a lot of presentations to hear, and importantly, a real mix of perspectives. So our first presentation will be from the European Commission, from Cohen Janssen, who will set the scene on the legislations and the landscape as Europe establishes the European data spaces and standardization comes to become a growing priority. And one of the key areas where standards are being set is the newly formed CEN and CENELEC Joint TC, or Technical Committee, JTC 25, which focuses on data management, data spaces, cloud and edge technologies. And we'll hear from Sebastian Steinbus on this key technical committee. He's the chair, of course. If you've attended webinars on HSbooster in the past, then you'll recognize René, René Lindner, who is a PhD in standardization and in particular link with research, and he'll be providing information on the importance of ensuring that there's a flow of contributions from R&I into standardization areas, or when there's a standardization request or standardization priority. We'll then change tack and hear from Martin Brinskoff, who is lead of around innovation at Copenhagen, University of Copenhagen, sorry, he's the scientific director of A&I and digital at the University of Copenhagen, and he'll provide a perspective on local digital twins within data spaces and standardization related issues around that. Diana Suarero is a researcher and consultant in urban studies and smart cities and public policy, and she will bring a series of experiences working and supporting research projects in this area, which she did through the HS Booster, and be able to give some practical examples around that as well. So it's great to see you again, Diana, too. And then finally, our last speaker, but not least, is from the European data space for smart communities, which is Sophie Mazeros, and she'll be providing information around those activities there. So there will be time for a little bit of time, because we've got so many presentations, a little bit of time for a question at the end of each. But if you do have questions, if you could change slides, Anna, then please do put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, so that our presenters can answer them in live as well, and we leave space for the presentations, etc. But we'll try to get at least one question after each person. Okay. And if you go to the next slide, please. Yes, and this is all being recorded, of course, and will be online very soon. The recording and presentations will be online today. Okay. So just as I said at the beginning, HSbooster was funded by the EC, by the European Union. And it was a project which provided mentoring services for EU projects and training. And with a number of the partners within the consortium, we're sustaining these activities. So this is the first of a series of webinars, deep dive webinars on different priority areas and looking at the standardization priorities. So we'll be following up with these types of webinars once every 2 to 3 months. Okay, so you'll expect information on the next one soon. The training academy as well, which was built up over the last 3 years, is full of online materials, which is open and free for people to use, and has become a real high impact area, high impact result of the project. There'll be training webinars continuing. I think we delivered around 20 of these over the lifetime of the project, and they'll be continuing with the first of these in June, looking at the role of associations in standardization. We have more planned over the summer too. And then the main area of the project was to set up and test a mentoring service for EU projects. And we are very pleased to say that we will be relaunching this in June in a self-sustainable format. So we'll be publishing information and relaunching the applications in about under a month's time. And we're hearing from different standardization experts who delivered these services and the projects who received them, so that we can improve how the services are delivered and tweak things so that they're even better this next time. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Cohen Janssen from the European Commission, who will give us some key background information and basically the status of data spaces at the moment, and in particular in relation, obviously, to legislation and standardization. So over to you, Cohen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Are my slides visible or not?
Yes, they are. They're visible, yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cohen Janssen, Policy Officer at DG Connect, the unit G1, which stands for Data Policy and Innovation. Thank you for the opportunity to give some background on the approach we're taking when it comes to standardization in data spaces. I will give some background first on what happened since 2020, when the European Strategy for Data was published, and then go to the current status with our standardization request before handing it over to the people that are really working on the standards. Let me try to get to the next slide. In this picture, in one slide, it shows a lot of the elements that are important when it comes to the European Strategy for Data as launched in 2020. Had the overall vision, you could say, is to establish a European single market for data, a space to boost the data economy, and to promote sharing of open data as well as restricted data with the data holders as important factors in establishing the rights on what can be done with the data. So this whole vision has been since then implemented on multiple levels. At the top, we see the data legislation and the policy initiatives there, where the Data Act is an important regulation that addresses the fairness aspects and the right to access data. If, for instance, if you are owner or user of a connected product. It also addresses interoperability in data spaces, and I will come back to that later. Another regulation is the Data Governance Act, which focuses more on the trust aspects, in particular when it comes to intermediaries that can play a role in establishing data sharing agreements and in facilitating the data sharing. Other regulations include the Open Data Directive that already existed before 2020, but is definitely an important element of the overall approach. And linked to the Open Data Directive, also the Implementing Act on High-Value Data Sets. There is more relevant. There are more relevant regulations. I listed here one of them, GDPR, but also regulations such as the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act can play a role. On the second row on the slides, we see then the common European data spaces, and this the European Union has been funding since 2022 initiatives to boost data sharing. Yeah, the funny word boost in the context of the HS booster, but to promote data sharing initiatives across 14 different domains. You see them listed here. And yeah, there is a reason for the diversity, because the use cases, the kind of data sharing mechanisms that need to be established can vary quite significantly depending on the domain requirements. So yeah, this has led to a whole wave of funded initiatives, starting with initiatives under Horizon Europe, coordination and support actions, and by now also in Digital Europe, under the Digital Europe program, for the deployment, the actual realization of these data spaces. Also listed there again, this is data sharing within the domains, but the high-value data sets, as mentioned earlier on the Implementing Act there in the regulations, will also play an important role, because for 6 important categories, public sector data will be made available, is being made available as we speak, and that can support such data sharing initiatives. On the next row, we find 2 bodies that have been created. One, the European Data Innovation Board, which was established under the Data Governance Act, and which oversees the implementation of the Data Governance Act, but also advises on elements such as interoperability across data spaces, and oversees the overall strategy and progress. And then on a more operational level, we find the Data Spaces Support Center, which is another Digital Europe funded project with a consortium that has been very successful in bringing the lessons learned across all these domains together, and has been capturing that in various deliverables, including the Data Spaces Blueprint. Then at the bottom, we find other enablers on a more technical level. Now, the topic for today is standards, so we'll come back to that later. Other elements that can play an important role in establishing the single market are digital identity, and not only of individuals, but also of organizations, legal entities. Smart middleware solutions, there's a big project underway called Simple, and other facilities, and high performance computing and AI factories, etc. So these are all more enablers on a technical level, and also of a horizontal nature. I will continue now to talk about standardization, because what is important is that these various domains and data spaces don't become data silos. And this is where interoperability and standards come into play. One other point I forgot, I had this slide also. I referred to the strategy as launched in 2020. In this year, and in the new Commission mandate, political guidelines, clear support is given to the further evolution of the data strategy, and there is an announcement there of a European data union strategy. And preparations for the consultation phase of this strategy are in full swing. Initial workshops have already been held. So there will be a further evolution of the European data strategy called the European Data Union Strategy, with important elements of simplification and further rationalization of the where possible of the related regulations. This all is also based on two reports that I think by now everyone will have heard of. The LETA report, Much More Than a Market, as well as the Draghi report on the future of European competitiveness. Also important to understand or to know is that the deployment is as I mentioned earlier, of data space in full swing, and that various projects are ongoing. Here's a whole list again of all the Digital Europe projects underway, and also their expected delivery dates. The slides will be shared after this presentation, so you can look at it at your leisure. Over to the standardization request called European Trusted Data Framework. The starting point of the standardization request is the Data Act. And in there, in Chapter 8, there are 4 articles that talk about or address interoperability requirements. And the data space interoperability is primarily addressed in Article 33, and that's the basis also of the standardization request. There are other interesting articles and that are also being have, for instance, Article 34 and 35 that have to do with cloud services. This is handled by another unit and also has a different approach that is being followed there for when it comes to standardization, and that's out of scope of my speech here today. The Article 36, essential requirements for smart contracts, this is still to be determined by the experts in the standardization committees to what extent that is can be brought into the overall standardization approach that we have defined. And this is, I know, for instance, that HSbooster has already defined specifications, but we have to kind of see how this all fits with the overall approach of related to Article 33. Article 33 uses the term essential requirements, and this needs to be understood in the context of the single market, the European single market, where harmonized standards can play a role in proving conformance with the essential requirements. So in a nutshell, in the regulation, essential requirements are defined, and then harmonized standards can be used by the participants or by the organization addressed in the requirements to prove their conformity with the requirements. Now, and the word harmonized links to the fact that when we are successfully able to create a harmonized standard, that this will apply across all member states, which of course makes sense because we're talking about essential requirements in the context of a single European market. Looking a bit closer at Data Act Article 33, in there, a couple of things are highlighted. The article addresses participants in data spaces. So it doesn't address data spaces because it is These are not necessarily legal entities or managed by a legal entity. So what is the participant in a data space that's being addressed? And then for the rest, in the points that follow, you can kind of see back the FAIR principles, the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and the reusability of data are yeah, if you read it, are elements that are captured in the Act. And then another very important aspect, because we're talking not only open data but restricted data, is the data sharing agreements, the contracts, the license terms, the terms under which the data can be shared, and with the very important prerogative of the data holder, the data rights holder. So based on this article, a couple of steps have been taken. As a first step, together with the high-level forum on European standardization, we worked in workstream 14 on a set of recommendations that have been of great help in defining, drafting the actual standardization request. In the standardization request, we follow a certain logic, requesting 5 deliverables, and that whole logic comes from this report, the work we did with the high-level forum. The standardization request was published or was shared with the European standardization organizations in June last year. After that, we had the consultation phase, and we are now, this is quite a lengthy process, we are in the final steps of adoption. So we have successfully completed the inter-service consultation, which is an internal review in the Commission, as well as the Committee on Standards, which means all the member states have given their green light for this standardization request. And we are now in the final steps in getting the standardization request formally adopted. As you may know or may not know, the standardization request takes the form of a Commission implementing decision. So there's a formal approval of the hierarchy is needed. It's good to know that in the meantime, standardization work is already ongoing. We have already actually a quite crucial part of the work was started already back in 2023 by CEN with the workshop called Trusted Data Transactions. And in the meantime, we have the CEN-CENELEC Joint Technical Committee 25 operational, and also HSbooster has established a new committee called TC Data. Taking a step back in and explaining a bit the logic that we are following in the standardization request. Here, a simplified picture of a data space. You can look at it as a set of consisting of, or an environment consisting of a governance layer, a services layer, and a protocols layer. And together, these 3 layers provide the optimal environment in which the data sharing process can take place. And the process is depicted there on the right of the screen, where you can see that there are basically 3 main steps when you talk about data sharing in the context of restricted data. First, you need to be able to discover data or data products, know that data exists. Then you need to be able to enter into negotiation and establish the agreement, the contracts under which the data will be shared with the data user. And then, of course, there is the actual access to the data, getting access, and that can take many different shapes and forms. It is not only file downloads, it can also be accessing, for instance, data from smart devices, connected devices, etc. And the use of the data, which also implies the ability to be able to understand the data, the semantics, the documentation of the data. So this is on the right, the process, and then the data space is the environment that helps to optimize the conditions under which this process can happen. There's a lot more to say about data spaces and the logic and the building blocks, and had the data spaces blueprint version 2 of the provided by the Data Space Support Center is an excellent source of information with many pointers to yet other sources. Then looking at the standardization request, so there are 5 main deliverables. One is a harmonized standard for trusted data transactions. And then there are some supporting deliverables, a technical specification on the way to manage data catalog, metadata, and implementation framework. This addresses the aspect of having being able to have a common set of catalog data, metadata, that enables you to search across multiple different data spaces. You may, for instance, some data may need to be combined across domains, and that starts then with being able to discover that, but also had the needs that's clearly out there. We see that happening already of domain-specific elements that need to be added to to the catalog data, as for instance for healthcare or for mobility, etc. A similar approach is followed for semantic assets, which covers quite a wide range, ranging from vocabularies to ontologies. Where again, we are not asking to develop a new ontology or a new vocabulary, but rather to establish the criteria on what type of ontologies and vocabularies have what they need to comply with in order to be safely used in data spaces, also addressing semantic annotation, for instance. And then the 2 last deliverables, one is on the data governance aspects of individual participants. In order to engage in data spaces as participant, you need to have your own house in order, be able to handle, manage your own data and related to that, the quality of that data. And also as a data user, you need to be able to manage the data that you have access to from other parties and ensure that you respect the related usage terms and conditions. And then the final one is the maturity model on common European data spaces, which aims to, it's a bit similar to what you could call minimum interoperability mechanisms that are, I think, originating from the smart cities and communities domain, where we try to come up with a set of criteria that will help data spaces to grow and converge and not reinvent wheels, basically. And also in that way provide transparency in the status of a data space. So these are the 5 main deliverables. In the standardization request, of course, there is more detail on these deliverables, but here I think I will keep it at showing a bit how the deliverables then fit in that picture that I showed earlier. So the trusted data transaction is clearly there on the individual participant layer, help enabling the discovery, getting to an agreement and the actual exchange. And then you see there the internal data governance processes, the green V there, that is relevant for the individual players, the data holders, data users, and any intermediation service providers. And then you see also there the magnifying glass, the discovery service, the catalog profile, and also the catalog service that supports individual participants in discovery of the data. And the semantics have been positioned on the usage layer. And so it all fits together. And again, a lot of the thinking comes from this high-level forum reports that I referred to earlier. I have more detailed slides. I think I'm running out of time, so I will just say I will share those. This is a detailed explanation for each of the deliverables, but skip them here. Just to manage to close then with this slide, saying that, hey, we are not starting from scratch. There is a lot of work ongoing and existing. Here listed are the work being done by SEMIC on semantic assets and vocabularies. That has been also explicitly mentioned in the standardization request as something to use and to leverage. A similar story for the data space support center deliverables, obviously, in particular the blueprint. The work ongoing on European level, which will be handled or explained just after me by Sebastian Steinbus, and the work also on the international level that I think will also be covered by him. So I think with this, I will close my presentation. There are some links here that could also be relevant, and so you can all find that back in the slide deck. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Koen. That was really, really interesting. I think it's very important that people get the overall picture from the legislation point of view, and then the reasons why the harmonized standards are needed to the standardization requests. So that was great. And so Koen's slides will be online, this afternoon. So you can access the links as well that he's put there. So thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, then pop them in the Q&A box. And you gave a perfect setup for Sebastian now, who is the chair of JTC 25, which of course is one of the technical committees which is charged with developing the standards for the standardization requests. So Sebastian, over to you.
Thanks a lot, and good afternoon also from my side. I hope you can hear me well and you can see my slides. As said before, so I think that was really a perfect handover from the thoughts of the European Commission. And then I really like the title while looking at my first page here, Shaping the Future. I think that is really the important point. What we do here, we have I think a common and good understanding of what data spaces are and also what kind of regulation is required for data spaces here in Europe. But the fun part comes now on the basis of those standards, where we can really start to innovate data sharing and the usage of data in the data economy. So that is a little bit the forward and not the subject of my talk today. I will go through the JTC 25 and how it is tasked to work on the standardization request and other aspects like presented before. So let us start with the boring part, the JTC 25 scope. So JTC 25 is a joint technical committee of two European standardization bodies, CEN and CENELEC, and the work that is done in the field of data/data management, data spaces, cloud, and edge. We didn't have a technical committee that could take the work on that. So JTC 25 was kicked off in September of the last year with a scope that you can see here on the slide. So standardization in the area of data management, data spaces, cloud, and edge, including data governance, data quality, data lifecycle management. Of course, interoperability, portability, and switching. Organization, methodologies, including IT management systems, processes, product evaluation schemes, and smart technologies, and all those things. As said, we had our first plenary meeting back in September, where we kicked off. We conducted already our second plenary meeting in February, and now preparing for our third plenary meeting in May 2024. So JTC 25 is really active and working on the standardization request. So JTC 25, as said, is a committee, and it was mentioned before. I'm chairing the committee, JTC 25, and I have great support from Helen Carnevale from Italy, from UNI, who is the community manager of JTC 25. But to really conduct the work and to work on all the standardization activities, we need working groups. The working groups, this is where the real work is happening, where the standards are shaped and created. And we started 4 of them. The first one is our advisory group. The advisory group took over the tasks from the focus group on data, data spaces, cloud and edge, identifying standardization gaps in Europe for data spaces, data management, cloud and edge, but is also actively reaching out and liaising with other technical committees and external liaisons to really ensure that the standards that are developed here are well connected to other committees and to other standards. We don't want to have competing standards or the same standards created in different committees, so we need to connect nicely, and this is what we do. We are well connected today already to international standardization activities, but also to the European standardization activities. And I mean, I don't have to say that here, I think, but we have a couple of really relevant aspects, like, for example, the digital product passport that is also enabled by data sharing. Or AI that is fueled by data. So we nicely need to connect all these things with each other. And that is to organize that basically the work of our advisory group that is chaired by Andrea Katscher. We have a working group 2 working on data spaces, chaired by Patrick Besoms and Martin Brinskov, who will also present later today, working on the data space topics really as presented before, the trusted data transaction, but also the maturity model of common European data spaces. And our working group 3 on data management and data governance, which is chaired by Ismael Caballero from Spain, which is working more on the governance part, especially on the data governance standard, but also supporting on the semantic parts. And then finally, well, it's not on the current standardization request, but it's part of our title. We have working group 4 on cloud and edge, which is chaired by Michiel Bolhuis from the Netherlands. So this is a little bit the boring setup and how we operate. If you're asking yourself already, okay, how can I participate? How can I join there? All the European projects out there, you can liaise with JTC25. You can set up a liaison. Just reach out to their community manager. For everyone else, please connect to your national bodies and get onboarded into the mirror committees, into JTC25, and then subsequently into the working groups. So, but let's talk a little bit more about content. So this is we're connecting nicely to Koen's presentation on the standardization request. This is what we see at the moment within the timeline. So we have those 7 deliverables. You will see that the trusted data transaction that was also briefly described before has 3 parts. The first one on terminology, concepts and mechanisms, a second one on trustworthiness requirements, and the third one on interoperability requirements. Koen also mentioned before that we had some pre-standardization work in a so-called CWA, a CEN and CENELEC workshop agreement that is producing pre-standardization deliverables, like the trusted data transaction part 1, terminology, concepts and mechanisms. This document was issued already by the CWA a while ago, and JTC25 took the work, worked a little bit more on that, and has just ended a couple of days ago with the first working phase. So this document will be sent to inquiry, the inquiry phase, where the national bodies review and approve the document in the first stage to become a preliminary standard before we enter then into the second working phase. Trusted data transaction part 2, trustworthiness requirements. This project is currently initiated under JTC25 because the CWA trusted data transaction is still working on this document. They are in the final stage with the so-called public inquiry, asking the public if they do like the document, working on the comments, and then this will be handed over as well to JTC25 for the future work. And the third one, the interoperability requirements, that is a project that is started already in JTC25. We start writing the standard and interoperability as described in the trusted data transaction, which is nicely related to the work that has been done in the so-called data space protocol as a technical specification that can be implemented to, well, exchange data in a data space. For the technical specifications on data catalog implementation framework, so talking about DCAT and DCAT AP, this is, well, of course, based on the work that has been done in the CEMIC action. Here we expect a lead from the HCTC data. ETSI has also established a new technical committee because a standardization request is not only sent to CEN and CENELEC, but to CEN, CENELEC, and ETSI. And ETSI has a new committee called TC Data that was kicked off 3 weeks ago. So this committee also starts working, and we expect the lead on the work on the data catalogs, but also on the technical specifications on implementation framework for semantic assets. In any case, it will be a collaboration between the two committees, JTC25 and HCTC Data, on all the items. We need to move together and come up with something that is nicely connected to each other and fits well to each other so that it really serves the need of the European community here. And then, as mentioned before, the standard on the quality framework for internal data governance and the maturity model for common European data spaces. We are preparing this work at the moment, and therefore always happy for good contributions and support in this work. This is a little bit the overview, and you also see the timelines when the deliverables are expected to be delivered. And the first one is already 1st of March 2026, and the second one 1st of June 2026. So we really need to speed up and deliver this in a timely manner. Another one that I did not mention yet, because it's not part of the standardization request, I mentioned that we also have the cloud and edge topic, and also our working group for cloud and edge is already working on required European standards. But in this case, not related to the Data Act Article 33, where the Standardization Act is standardization request is working on, but related to the Data Act Article 34, switching and interoperability in a European context. Just mentioning it here, this is a project that has also started already in JTC 25. So I would like to also explain a little bit of the details, what we are really working on in JTC 25. So what is really the heart of the matter. In data spaces, it's always about data sharing and somehow a trustworthy, a trusted environment under some condition, in a regulated way, as it was put before. I really like this picture that comes from the Trusted Data Transaction Part 1, explaining the concepts and the terminology that we have here, especially when we focus on the European market and the European regulations. Of course, we see that we have on the lower side left, we see the data provider and the data user on the other side, and they need to interact with each other to a certain extent. So we need those interoperability steps to publish data sets that could be consumed, subsequently the discovery from a data user of such data assets, the negotiation of data sharing or data usage contracts, what are the rights, obligations on that matter, and then the practical exchange or sharing of data. However that looks like. I'll send you a copy of the data. I'll give you access to an API, and you can send a query. You can send your cool algorithm to analyze my data. However that looks like. Different variants are possible here. And then, of course, the one hand side for the data user, what are the access and usage restrictions? How can I access and use the data then subsequently? But what is especially in the European context of high relevance is the grant of the rights to a data provider, because we talk about a data rights holder, someone that holds the rights on the data and that can decide or control how those data are shared. And of course, this step needs to be taken. A data rights holder needs to grant the rights to a data provider before the data is shared with someone else. Maybe even afterwards, after the data was shared, the data user is asking, hey, can I do something else with that one? So to adjust the rights on the data. Those are the really interesting aspects of the standards that we are working on. And of course, nicely connected then to the data producer. So the system or the entity that initially produced the data. This is a little bit the setup. And I said the first part of the trusted data transaction is focusing on the terminology so that we get a good understanding on the concepts. The second part on trustworthiness. So what does this make trustworthy? What kind of claims do I have to present to negotiate or reconcile between policies on the one hand side and the claims that we have on the other hand side? And then finally, the interoperability part that is required so that those parties can really interact with each other. That is the overarching concept. You will see in the middle, there is a data product that is somehow related to a data producer, that comes with an authorization or a consent, that comes with information how it can be published and discovered, with some rights and some other capabilities. This is another very important aspect that we need to describe and that we need to connect to the other standardization activities. So when we talk about a data product, JTC 25 at the moment, then we talk about the combination of data with metadata and services. Being aware that metadata, of course, is again data, and then we have such a recursive application of such a thing. But this is the key. A data product is about data, metadata, and services. In a broader context, of course, we can think of a lot of other things that are related to a data product, like marketing, pricing, all those things. But that's not subject of our work. So what is really relevant here in our scope is the topic about the metadata. What is metadata? Metadata is in general data about data. And this can be a lot. And it, of course, nicely connects to this whole discussion on data quality, what can be really huge. But you saw that we have time constraints. We need to deliver in time. So we're going to focus with the metadata and the data quality aspect a little bit more on the data space specific parts, which is the catalog information, publication and discovery with DCAT and their application profiles, the syntax and the semantics of the data with the semantic assets, and with the data rights. So the data sharing contracts, the management and the governance of the data rights that we have, the rights and the obligations that you have when you share or consume the data. And as said before, this needs to be somehow managed on the one hand side. I need to be able, especially as a small mid-sized company, but in general, organizations of all type and size, needs to be able to manage those metadata and the data in a way that they are really shareable and usable. But I also need to set up a data governance structure for that in such a multi-stakeholder, multi-leveled setup where we talk about regulations that needs to be implemented, but also the company rules that needs to be implemented, and so on and so forth. So this is the overarching picture, how we are working on it, how we are at the moment start to working on those standards and shaping those standards. So closing a little bit, what's next? So this is a more or less narrow scope of JTC 25 where we need to deliver something very specific. But there are other activities that are not the subject of my presentation today. We have international standardization, specifying what data spaces are and how they can be used. Those things need to, as said, connect nicely to each other. We have our European regulations, our European approaches that have very clear demands, but we are not an island, we are not a silo, so we need to be able to connect to everyone else and vice versa. And this is why we need international standards that we are already working on. And I have just mentioned a couple of them here. We need to keep the activities aligned, and especially all the implementing parts and the standardization part. And I presented before. So we have a little bit a time pressure. We are time critical. We need to deliver our standards soon. The Data Act comes into force this year, and we need standards that really support the Data Act. And as said, we need to align the standardization work, the specification work with the implementing work. You're building data spaces, you're using data from data space, and you want to connect to data spaces. And we need to leverage your experience, your knowledge. So it is mandatory to connect with the implementing projects and the specification project or standardization projects. It's nice to have great standards, but they're useless if they are not used. So we need to keep the activities aligned. And therefore, I think I would like to close with my very clear call to action. Join us in the standardization efforts. As said, please connect to me, to Helen Carnevale for the JTC 25 work. You're more than welcome. Connect to your national bodies. They can support you in connecting to the standardization activities and help us to shape the future together. And with this, I think I can say thank you and hand back to you, Nicolas.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. That was very interesting and really interesting to see how the technical committee is set up and also the various priorities that you have. For a lot of people, in the internal workings of a technical committee is not something that's well known. So it's great to see. And yeah, it's clear that you can get involved with this activity. So I'd just like to mention there is actually a project called Stand ICT where you can apply for funding to do exactly this type of work. So you can apply to be reimbursed for various activities, including effort in participating in meetings. And we'll add a link in the chat about the current open call. There are regular calls that Stand ICT run on ICT standardization and ICT. So our next speaker, though, thank you, Sebastian. Our next speaker is René Lindner. Of course, there are a lot of research projects working in the data area. So the question now that René can maybe address is how to bridge these R&I projects into standardization and to support the work of Sebastian and JTC 25. So over to you, René.
Well, thanks a lot, Nick. And yeah, now I got my way back to the origin actually of HSbooster, which was like supporting the different research projects in engaging in standardization. And throughout this process, I have supported the project from the very, very beginning. And I'm happy to talk today about how actually research and innovation and standardization can be better linked together. And why better linked together? That means that somehow like there might be a bridge that need to be overtaken, no? And this like two reasons for this. One is like the value of standardization for research innovation is still not visible for all researchers, I would say. But in the end, we have two really main topics within my investigations on standardization and research innovation, which are really like highlighting the importance of standardization. One is like the really developing new standards or provide input to existing ones. It's really supporting the transfer of project results into the practice in the end. And the second one is also like this throughout the standardization process, which is an open process. It allows the interaction with a variety of stakeholders within the topic of research. The other thing is also that why it is important to look a bit further into how actually standardization can be addressed in research projects is that standardization is not always appropriately used within the research innovation projects. So there could be, for example, that some research projects say, oh, I did standardization activities, I just referred to a standard in a project, so one activity. So that's not the case. That's of course not a standardization activity. So there's a need actually to provide information on how this could be set up, and only a few projects have provided information on potential approaches. And I would present one approach from my PhD, which is an IDEP methodology on standardization activities in European projects. Which is a 5-step methodology. You can see the IDEP, which means like for each of the steps, the first letter. The first step is analyzing the state of the art in standardization, which means really that you need to consider what kind of standardization activities are conducted in the project, or which should be conducted, and who has the knowledge about standardization at first, what kind of standards are existing, and how this could be used inside the project. The second one is based on what kind of standards you have identified, and also based on the maybe also different needs of the project stakeholders and the end users involved, are the identification of new standardization potentials. So like there's a gap maybe in standardization. Nevertheless, I have participated in more than 15-20 research projects and supported their standardization. And you can imagine that there could be 1 or 2 standardization potentials identified, but also like maybe 10 or 50. It's really important to define the project standardization strategy, to actually assess the contributions to standardization, to plan these contributions. And what is really important, what also Sebastian said just before, is actually like to liaise with these relevant standardization committees, which is one of the most easiest aspects actually to get engaged with standardization, I would say. after having this definition of how you would like to conduct the standardization activities in your project, you implement these activities and really you do it end focus and user focus, because in the end, these are the one who are going to apply this standard and they need to be involved highly in this process. Last but not least, one thing which in the first years when I was in the research projects involved with including standardization, the promotion exploitation of the standardization activities were quite limited. But this was quite important, because in the end you could see it now with the case of this CEST workshop agreement on data trust frameworks, that it's so important that you already think about the next step. So if you have developed maybe a CEST workshop agreement or the international workshop agreement or any standardization roadmap, whatever your outcome of research project is, you have to recheck what are the next steps. You have to promote to standardization activities to the target group. You may also provide support to apply the standards which you have developed, because there's also something which through my investigations were not an easy task. So you could provide some training, some additional material besides the standards you have developed. Nevertheless, every project is unique, and the respective approach to standardization within the project is also unique. The IDEP methodology has also been used within the HSbooster project. There's developed a standards orientation tool, SOP, which you can find on the HSbooster website. There is these the 5 standardization steps which I've just mentioned are included there. Besides providing more information on the project and on the project status, you get then in the end a highly dedicated set of advisors based on your provided information, and also get some links and further information there. Now coming back to the topic of data spaces, and there I just like try to bridge here the gap between the methodology presented and the topic, and they're like presenting just like an example how it could look like for a project which is focusing on data spaces, on how to implement this 5-step methodology. The first step is the state-of-the-art analysis, as said before. So like checking what is the standardization landscape on the topic. Here, it's really important to check what kind of websites are really crucial to get information on the relevant standards. In my case, I like most the ISO online browsing platform, which are really provides a lot of information, also gives you detailed information on the different sections of a standard, and also the standards like EU website are available, but also other websites from national standardization bodies, like for example from DIN, are really accurate to conduct the standardization analysis. Then there you can conduct workshops to identify new topics for standards, which I said before is the second step. Then there's a possibility to develop this standardization strategy, and there's like one example for this is clearly, like as mentioned before, like to collaborate with the JTC 25 on data management, data space, cloud, and edge via this liaison. Then this implementation of this standardization activities is actually this three examples mentioned here. As said before, the contribution by liaison is there's a specific CEST guide 25 on this, where you get a lot of information how this could be set up. It's quite easy approach, and what also the benefits of a liaison are. Another way is also like, because it's sometimes maybe not easy to provide all the content of your research throughout this the duration of the development of a full consensus standard. So you could see it in the previous presentations. The CEST workshop agreements which have been developed can also be developed within this furthermore in this research projects, and of course also be possible to invite, of course, standardization committee members to participate in these workshop agreements, so that they have like a more direct link directly when developing this, and then this also much easier than for these standardization committee to lift up this document and to use it in their standardization committee atmosphere. you get more information on this on Sense Like Guide 29, which is explaining more information there. Nevertheless, that's one specific item which I always would like to mention here is you have a really good possibility always also to comment on ongoing standardization activities. It was mentioned before that Sebastian said you may go over these national mirroring committees of European or international standardization committees to get information on standard, but when there's a national standard or a European standard which will be nationally adopted, which is the case on European level always, is then that it will be freely available on the website of the standardization body in Europe, and then you have the possibility to comment on these standardization activities. You really should use this opportunity. Last but not least, I mentioned before, the promotion exploitation of standardization activities are highly crucial in order to get really an impact of standardization activities which you have conducted. Last but not least, I just give a short overview of some publications on standardization research projects which have been prepared by myself and some colleagues of different projects which are related to standardization and the topics of mostly city resilience and smart cities, which are also like linking to the topic of data space as well. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm looking forward to any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much, Bennett. Really useful as ever. Thank you, and it's clear that there's a lot of opportunities for people working in research and EU projects to be contributing here. So, what I'd like to do now is we'll go back to actual applications of local digital twins and data spaces. So I'd like to hand the floor over to Martin Brinskoff, who was mentioned in Sebastian's presentation earlier as being the co-chair of the Working Group 2 in JTC 25 on data spaces. And as I said earlier, he's the Scientific Director of AI and Digital at University of Copenhagen. So Martin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Do you hear me? Do you see me? Do you see the slides?
Yes, loud and clear, yeah.
Very good. So it's an interesting conversation we're having here. So, of course, focusing on data spaces, but I would say also when they return from data space to the ground. So there is only one ground in that sense. And this is what local digital twins is all about. And that's what the work that many people actually are looking into in this space is all about. What happens when we cannot just virtualize and send things into the cloud, but actually there is only one square meter, or there's only, one place where this happens. And that's a situation where things get a little bit complicated, because when Kuhn, you showed also these 14 data spaces, well, they actually take place in the same physical world. So how is that then managed? So I'm going to say a little bit about this and how standardization, validation in various projects and so on fit together. So I'll go rather quickly through this, and if there are any questions, we can do it now or follow up at a later stage. So this is me, no more introductions, but just to say I've been working in this space. What happens when the digital sort of leaves the screen and comes out and then comes back in again and then goes out and somehow needs to be managed. What you see on the screen is from my hometown of Aarhus. This is City Hall Tower, and some efforts back in the day, almost 20 years ago, trying to make interfaces for citizens to give feedback on how well the city is actually managing everything in the city, and then show that physically on buildings. So early attempts to understand how the physical and the digital spaces flow together, and also what are the procedures we can set up actually then to make joint action, to make policies and political decisions. As it happens, we do not all as human beings agree on what should happen. So this is not just let's fix it. It's also how can we deliberate about where are we going? What do we do about the green transition? Fast, slow, in between, this, that. So I want to highlight here that this is not just solutionism. It's not just about fixing problems. That's actually quite doable when we agree on which problems to fix. The question is, how do we create means to actually address them, discuss them, simulate what would happen if we invest a lot here, if we do this, if we ask citizens, companies, everyone, countries to align to some targets, what will happen? So it's much more complicated than just finding problems and solving them. We've been writing about those, and I think it's very clear also that there are globally different approaches from very hands-off to very hands-on, and Europe somehow tries to find the balance there, using regulation as one means. We all know the Digital Decade policy program, which has a set of targets, and data spaces fit in there, as you can see on level 3 from the top. So it's all about creating legitimate agency, not just agency. In the current political situation, I think we see some very illegitimate agency, but how do we create the basis for societies and citizens to agree that this is actually agreed upon action that we take? And very much what you also said in the beginning, Koen, it is about protection. So why do we create rules? It's in order for something actually also not to happen, not to go off rails. But also it's protection from violating rules. So if you follow the standards, actually you are in the clear. You are assumed conformant or compliant with the rules. And this makes innovation less risky. So protection is also protection from violating the laws. And this is a very, very important function of these standards. I don't know if this was mentioned already, but over the last 10 years, there's been a swing from European Union, working by directives, which has to be implemented, you could say, locally. In this sense, a member state is the local level, seen from Brussels, towards acts which immediately has the same legal force in all European member states immediately and in the same way, using the same wording. And that has created a different dynamic where standards and the assumed compliance to the acts actually relies on those standards. And can we say, Koen and Sebastian, that we are a little bit late on the standards to be compliant, but this is also why it's super important that these standards are created. I see a thumbs up. I didn't see who put it there, but yes, this is why I think this slide explains why the urgency. It's because standardization is the cheap way to ensure that you are compliant. I mean, you could also hire 100 lawyers and wait for the lawsuits, and well, that stifles kind of innovation. What we have done over the years is, of course, we have looked at what has been put together as best practices and guidelines and so on, locally in the member states, in the EU, globally, and the commercial space. And from our side, and that's Open Agile Smart Cities and Communities, which is municipalities, regions, local communities from Europe, based in Europe, but actually all over the world, to notice that there has to be some kind of minimal interoperability across all these sectors and systems. Otherwise, it becomes very complicated. And you mentioned this also, Koen, in your presentation. It's easy when we have silos. You can just define it within, I don't know, transportation or healthcare, but data doesn't respect these silos, or at least becomes very expensive to have silos that are duplicating each other. So just a few words. I don't think it was mentioned yet, but this is how the world of standardization is segmented into governance levels. This from the perspective of Denmark, where I sit here in Copenhagen, Danish standards. And this is what was mentioned before by Sebastian, René, and others, that, I mean, you can get involved on the local level, local again, meaning the member state, national level. And then you can be represented in CENS and ELEC and ETSI, and in the global level with ISO IC and also ITU, which is the United Nations standardization body. This is from the Danish Standards Guide on the sustainable digital transformation. And there you see, of course, there's these World Trade Organization de jure standards, which are the ones I just showed before with the national, the European, and then international level. But then we, of course, also know of all other kinds of standards. I mean, if you call Microsoft, they would say, oh, yeah, we use standards. What are the standards you use there? Oh, it's our standards. Right. The same you could say with W3C and IEEE, actually standards we use all the time. But the world of standards is very large. However, when we look at what Kuhn presented and the European legislation being supported by standards, we are clearly in the de jure standardization part of the world. So we've been trying, as said, since some years to guide companies, citizens to find out, this is the example from Denmark, what to do. And again, my focus has been really on how to secure a minimal level of interoperability, which is, of course, would be nice. It's not as easy to do as it is to say. And this has then also gone into the global level. This is the example, which is backed by 19 UN agencies, standardization and best practice guidance covering all 194 member states of the ITU. So just to say that actually these processes of learning, putting into pre-normalization, standardization, then validating through pilots, I think Sophie will come back to this, and then feeding that into either more precise standards or new versions of standards, which happens regularly, perhaps every 5 years or so. That's actually a very big wheel that we need to keep turning. So this is the big wheel where data spaces and local digital twins fit. Now, and so this is an example of such a global minimal interoperability mechanism standard, which covers all 94 countries, but actually takes a little bit of extra work then to work in practice. And that's things you do on the global regional level, such as in Europe. So data spaces, we saw before that there are many of these. This is a more layered perspective that data, of course, has existed in, well, what you could call data spaces already on different levels. But then when you have these established and you have some access rules and technical APIs, you can do digital twins, you can do simulations, and you can do what is called the Cityverse, which is the citizen metaverse. And this is where local digital twins, in a way, becomes the fusion of all of this. So when you put all of this together, it's very difficult not for that to be actually data that has actionable models, and that's a local digital twin. The local in digital twin simply means that it's localized, so it's fitting the digital on to the physical. Yeah, and so the established global term for the metaverse for cities and communities and citizens, that's Cityverse. And why am I saying this? That's because local digital twins and Cityverse very often, especially in a European context, they appear together because, well, the local digital twins, they do have interfaces, and citizens, companies, institutions have to use these interfaces. So, well, at some point, the data spaces, they become interfaces and they become part of what we could say is the Cityverse, which is also being standardized. So that's an example from the city of Rotterdam of a local digital twin, of course, building on data space and so on, but just to give a concrete visual. Of course, it's the building level, it's the neighborhood level, it's about safety, it's about building permits, it's about visualizing new buildings. But in some ways, that's the easy part. The difficult part is, as I said in the beginning, how to manage all this. And ultimately also, who provides the infrastructure for managing all this. In this geopolitical situation, I think we're all acutely aware that it matters who has the sort of digital train tracks for our societies. So at the moment, this is, I would say, a little bit still up in the air. You may disagree, but I think if you come from a municipal level, I mean, René, you represent the German cities. I don't think this has been fixed yet. We have from Germany a very nice Dienstspec in this area, but to say it's done, I think would be maybe a stretch. But the question is then, how can we still make it practical, manageable, and also somehow sector relevant? So we have this T shape. Some things are in common. This is, you could say, the minimal part, but then transportation, healthcare, all the other domains that you showed in the beginning, Koen, I mean, they do have their specifics. So how do we square that circle? And that's, I think, part of the work we're doing now in the JDC 25 and also in other places. This is the example from Rotterdam, trying to conceptualize what we're trying to do in the world of Lego. And I mean, if I look at these, they look fairly much the same. So this is perhaps where you, Sophie, will a little bit take your departure. So to conclude and to point to some concrete parts where you can take part, this has a lot to do with managing different governance levels and levels of operation. So again, the city level, it's sometimes even not granular enough. I mean, sometimes you have the district level, you have the neighborhood, sometimes you have the regional level very prominent. It's not so important in Denmark in the planning perspective, but I mean, in Germany, France, other places, it's quite important. So how do we ensure that these governance levels and operational levels are actually supported, not in a naive way, but in a very, very concrete, practical, safe, and lawful way? It's not so easy, but this is where hopefully local digital twins can help a little bit. There is a network with participants, designated contacts in all European member states, all 27. It's called the Smart Communities Network, and this is where you should be if you want to engage on the practical side of this. You can see the slides here, what you get out of being part of it, but I mean, it's a European initiative and, well, supported by all the associations you can think of. Then I would also point to a few places where you could sign up. On the global level, a lot of this happens in the United Nations part of the park. Started Group 20, it's called Internet of Things, Digital Twins, and Sustainable Smart Cities and Communities. That's a lot of things, but it's global and it's a quite interesting forum for this. On the European level, obviously, ETSI TC Data for the more technical part, and CEN TC 465 on well, potentially also some technical stuff more on the indicator side and the management level where you link the technical to some goals. And then, of course, there's the piloting, which we will hear more about. And a small advertising plug. We have from the CEN TC 465 a new report coming out this summer on the twin transition in the ad hoc group in TC 465. There's been a year of work on finding out what is there of, well, existing standards, obviously, but also case studies and initiatives, and putting that together and summarizing in recommendations for standardization. So follow the ICLEI and OASC channels, newsletters, or whatever to follow here. And I think Monica Heider from ICLEI, who is the, I would say, biggest pen on this one, is also in the audience here. So feel free to reach out to Monica or myself. And if you want to be really, really involved, the finalization moment with the recommendations discussion is going to be 3rd of June in Copenhagen at Danish standards. So if you want to take part in that, you can also reach out to me. And of course, throw in your time in the very important work we're doing here, either on the practical validation side, And if you're adventurous in the standardization developing organization side in, well, then TC 465, in TC Data, or TC 25, but different conversations in different places. And I think that's it from my side. Thank you so much, and back to you.
Thank you, Martin. That was great. Thank you very much. Really interesting real world perspectives there as well. So, and a good link to TC 465, because I'd like to hand the baton over to Diana now. So Diana worked a lot with HSbooster, was one of our key experts actually, working with Rene as well in supporting projects around the topic of smart cities, and TC 465 was one of the related technical committees to this. So Diana, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So I'm aware of time. I noticed that we are over time. So anyway, I prepared a very light deck of slides about the experience that I had within the HSbooster support in the realm of smart cities. So in my presentation, it was shared that I'm a researcher and consultant, but also very significantly in this context, I am a delegate at ISO and CEN level, so at international and European level, in the committees working on sustainable cities and communities. And also at a national level, I am a convener of Working Group 1, working specifically in management systems, which I'm sure it will show by the presentation I will share with you. So very briefly, I will address the evolving concept of smart cities, highlight the differences between research and development and research and innovation, which is very important to understand the bridge that Rene was talking about. Then the experiences with network nature and net zero cities, and the opportunities that standardization offers as a research and innovation tool. So smart city is an evolving concept. As we know, the prevailing idea of smart cities for a long time put a lot of emphasis in the technology and technology aspect of it. And of course, it is a key nuclear aspect of the smart cities concept. But fortunately, over time, it evolved to a more holistic and encompassing concept, which is sometimes addressed as sustainable smart cities. But fortunately, nowadays, if you say smart cities, people don't think exclusively about technology. So smart cities encompasses technology, environment, people, governance, and economy. A lot of elements are part of the smart city. Of course, as we all know, it's a complex problem. It's very hard to try to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, as we have seen by previous presentations. So the key element is integration and stakeholder engagement to make it happen, right? So you can have a collaborative effort to put everything together. This, of course, to make it work at any scale. So cities, big, medium, small-sized cities, and communities, also in the urban realm and beyond. So not only urban, not only rural, in between. So literally cities and communities, which of course encompasses all kinds of human settlements. So R&D and R&I. So the difference is, I think, important to clarify and to help bridge what is usually understood as research and development, which I think usually people are more familiar with, and how can you bridge that with research and innovation. So in research and development, you have a process focused on generating new knowledge that will be then applied to create new or improved products, services, or processes. Usually it is associated with scientific and technical advancement, usually performed within the scope of universities and, of course, other types of institutions, but most of the times within the scope of universities. Then you have research and innovation, which is a broader concept that includes research and development, but emphasizes the translation of research into market-ready or impactful innovations. This includes not only technological advancements, but also new business models, social innovation, and policy design. So the key differences is that R&D is mainly technical and scientific, while R&I includes social, economic, and market applications. Their outcome focus also differs. So R&D aims at knowledge and prototype creation, and R&I focuses on real-world implementation and impact. As you can easily see, they complement each other. R&D provides the foundational knowledge and technological breakthroughs, and R&I ensures that these advances are transformed into practical, scalable solutions that create real-world value. So going through very quickly and broadly through the experiences with Network Nature and Net Zero Cities. So these were two separate consultancies provided with the support of HSbooster, and they were provided by myself and by Renee Lindner that just presented. So from a standardization perspective, what we had in mind was precisely the difference between R&D and R&I. So the idea is, how can we introduce both these projects, Network Nature and Net Zero Cities, into standardization? Because the idea is, how can you make the most of the new knowledge that is being produced in Network Nature and in Net Zero Cities, and how can you actually use standardization as a tool to transform research outcomes and everything that is happening in those large two projects into practical and scalable solutions in the realm of Europe in this case, because that is the scope, of course, of the two projects. So going into Network Nature, a very brief description of what exactly is, and I invite you, if you don't know the project, to do a quick Google and you will very quickly find it and you can learn more about it. So is an EU-funded project that fosters collaboration across various sectors to promote the implementation of scaling of nature-based solutions to advance nature-based solutions for environmental sustainability and climate resilience. It is also a hub that collects and connects EU-funded nature-based solutions projects to enhance knowledge sharing and impact. So the benefits that standardization can bring to Network Nature are varied, but I just summed up a couple of them. So it can connect more easily a wide range of stakeholders, ensuring that knowledge is applied effectively and in a useful way for many other communities and cities. It can promote shared frameworks and standardized approaches, making nature-based solutions comparable, scalable, and adoptable across regions and sectors. It can help foster a cross-sectoral collaboration, linking government, academia, civil society, and businesses. And it can contribute to create tools, platforms, and training that supports the uptake and replication of innovation, which of course ensures long-term impact, which is something that you usually need to work hard to achieve, but these types of projects are extremely useful to precisely achieve that. In the case of Net Zero Cities, Net Zero Cities is also a EU-funded project supporting European cities in achieving climate neutrality by 2030 as part of the EU mission on climate neutral and smart cities. It helps cities design, test, and scale innovative systemic solutions through funding, technical support, and collaborative learning. So from research to urban transformation, the project is extremely important to help cities design and implement actionable roadmaps toward net zero emissions. It brings additional support through funding through city mission pilots, where innovative climate solutions are tested in real-world conditions. It brings together municipalities, business, researchers, and civil society to co-create solutions. It develops common metrics, methodologies, and toolkits. And again, it supports capacity building and replication and connects local action to national and EU level climate policies. So it's a very ambitious and broad scope of action that, again, it takes a while to make it work all together. And that's why standardization can be very important to help and contribute to all of these goals. As someone who engages and actively participates in standardization at international and European level, I couldn't help but mention a few challenges when translating research and development activities into research and innovation activities. I listed a couple of them that I won't go through them. The slides then will be shared. But you have technical challenges, institutional challenges, and social challenges. And the draft in research and innovation, and specifically within the scope of standardization, is that when you are drafting a standard, the requirements and what you need to have in mind is very different from, for example, when you are conducting research or writing an article. You need to think of drafting a document that can be used by anyone in different parts of the world or in different parts of Europe. You have to think that it needs to be useful for different types of stakeholders, different types of cities at different scales, very large cities and very small communities. And that is also part of what makes it very challenging, but also extremely motivating. So these are just a couple of challenges that I listed. So from a standardization perspective, there are several types of documents that you can produce. I think it was already mentioned very lightly, and I will also do it very lightly. But out of the different types of documents related with standardization that you can create, in the specific case of network nature and net zero cities, the recommended output by both me and Renee was that these projects should, of course, establish a liaison that was already mentioned as a possibility at CEN level, and go forward with a CEN workshop agreement, which is a series of meetings. And the output of a series of meetings is a document that is an outline of something that can then become a standard. And as you can see here, at more developed research and innovation standards, then you have other types of standards, which is a technical specification or an European or international standard. What was recommended for network nature and net zero cities was a workshop agreement, since they are in the early stages of their standardization journey, which of course it can take a while because we are talking about very large scale projects in both situations. So to conclude, opportunities when it comes to standardization as a tool for research and innovation, and a great way to maximize benefits from what your research or realm of activity can be at a public level, private level, NGOs, whichever is your scope of action. Standardization is a great way, a great opportunity to sit relevant stakeholders at the table. Industry representatives, large companies, SMEs, researchers, public authorities, civil societies, organizations, and end users. And to be truly useful, it should aim at providing small pieces of the puzzle so that each organization, city, and community is free to adapt it to their own needs, ensuring interoperability and flexibility. As I think Sebastian said in his presentation, what we want to create and aim at is to create standards that are truly useful for anyone around the world or in Europe at any scale, working in any realm. And in order to achieve that, we should try to refrain to create standards that have a too large scope, that can feel too constricting and are harder to integrate in the management systems that are already put in place within a specific community and city. So to conclude in the same way I started, standardization in the context of smart city fosters integration and stakeholder engagement at any scale, urban and beyond, which in other words, it means that management systems and governance are the two key elements to make it work all around. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Diana. Yeah, and I think the stakeholder engagement is really important, in particular for compliance, particularly for compliance, to make sure that the standards are compliant as possible, and is something that the people who have to comply agree on and are able to comply with in the end. So the importance of engagement with different stakeholders is really important. So Diana, thank you very much. And we have now our last presentation, okay, from Sophie Mazeros from the European Data Space for Smart Communities. So Sophie, over to you, and I see you already.
Thank you. I hope you can see my screen. All right, so indeed, thank you for the invitation, and it's been really, really great listening to all the work and presentations that just preceded this one, because I mean it's very relevant for this project, everything that you said. So it was very, thank you for that. So before I start, I also wanted to make a disclaimer that I mean, Martin Brinsko is very much part of this initiative. He's very much the brains behind this initiative from the very beginning. So Martin, please feel free to jump in if you like, of course. All right, so just to start off, I also wanted to give a little bit of context here. Maybe this is actually what Martin was talking about, so I don't know if you want to take over here, because this is really your turn. Okay. But there is actually an environment where we come from, and this is indeed well, I would like to believe, or I think we would like to believe, that it comes from a needs-based legislation, which is that the data landscape within Europe has been very fragmented. Of course, we all know about the dependence of the non-EU tech giants. There we have had, because of the silos, because of the fragmentation, interoperability issues, there's a lack of trust when it comes to public authorities or when it comes to digital innovation. But we do have a lot of data lying around, and that can be used for improving social services. So the opportunity is definitely there. And all the European legislations that are listed on the right side here were put in motions to basically target this. Of course, it started with the announcement of the digital decade, but if you zoom in, then we go into this European strategy for data, fleshed out subsequently by the Data Governance Act and the Data Act. And the latter two ones are actually the ones which very, very clearly state the need for common European data spaces as an enabler of a European single market for data. Of course, later we would like to, or I would like to add here the role of the Interoperability Act, as data spaces also have the potential for bridging this. However, when we talk about the European data spaces for smart communities, we have two environments that we are evolving with together, that we are trying to keep up with. So on the left-hand side, you can see the vision of European common data spaces. which means that there are common European data spaces in different strategic areas such as mobility or tourism or energy. Maybe it already rings a bell that these are actually very domain specific, unlike the smart communities one. But the vision essentially is that these projects or initiatives were launched to reach out to the local level and help the deployment of local data spaces and linking them together in the form of a common European data space specific to the domain they are in. There are some relevant initiatives that I think also link here. The Data Space Support Center, of course, IDSA is, for example, part of that. And Simple, and these are both there to enable this federation or help the coordinated development of the European data spaces and subsequently the local data spaces as well. The right-hand side is Martin's famous image that we will never get tired of, which is that actually the data spaces themselves fit into a larger narrative. And this narrative is in fact the one pointing at the digital transformation of communities supported by not only European legislations, but European funding translated into European initiatives. So we are talking here about the common European data spaces, but also, for example, the testing and experimentation facilities or the Cityverse projects. Of course, this also means that these actions actually look at the journey itself. So as you can see, we look at first, like, okay, there's data around. How do we organize this data on a local, national, and European level? And once we have this data available, how do we link it to actually AI-driven solutions? And of course, this is where we position the MIMS as an enabler. Here's a list of the European Common Data Spaces, but maybe you are aware of this, but you will receive this as part of the slide. However, now let's focus on a little bit on smart communities, which is that what are we here talking about what are we faced with actually in this context? So the data spaces in the smart communities domain, they are cross-sectorial, they are cross-border, they foster public-private partnerships, they consider the quadruple helix stakeholders. So this, I think, links back quite well to the previous presentation. But I think what's quite important that ultimately we are working towards creating value, and the value is also multi-faced. So it's social, economic, technical. We have to think from different directions, especially because we are working with public authorities when we talk about smart communities in this context. But ultimately, what we are faced with is we have complex scenarios, complex challenges. So a little bit about the history here. This project was launched in 2022 October, and the first year we focused on actually creating the resources for how to actually create a data space. So it means that we did a blueprint accompanied by a roadmap to how to deploy a data space, capacity building materials, and we also started fostering a community around this initiative. Since 2023 October, we are actually more entangled with the community because we are in fact looking at them to deploy the data spaces for smart communities or the blueprint itself. This happens via open calls. So we had 3 rounds of open calls which were concluded by now, but we have real life use cases that are deploying the blueprint, and as such we can iterate with them and learn from them. And based on this, we can finalize the blueprint for the data space, but also start working towards a federated ecosystem of European data spaces. So again, I discovered this, but maybe just for you to know that we have now finished the selection process, and we have 11 cross-sectorial co-funded pilots that we are working with together, as well as all the partners of the project itself. So this is a high-level architecture of how to actually visualize what I've been just talking about. So okay, we have the pilot 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and how do we actually intend to link them together, federate them? So we have defined 3 components: the authorization policy store, the universal trust registry, and basically description of digital services and data offers. So it's a catalog. Of course, these are, again, we are discussing whose responsibilities, what extent are they supposed to deploy these components. So this is currently happening. But that said, when I say this is currently happening, we are not only working with these pilots, we are also working with a wider community that represents, again, the quadruple helix. So we have a stakeholder forum, essentially the community around the data spaces. We have more than 480 individuals in there. We meet once a month, and we always discuss, well, on the one hand, we offer the opportunity for relevant actors to just come and present their activities. So it can be, for example, one of you guys who come with a standardization topic, or it's just a private person who has some technological solution for public authorities. So it's a quite nice environment. We are quite active there as well. So the resources we have is on the firstly, we have the blueprint, of course. It has a non-technical and technical element. Then we have the roadmap to deploy the data space itself. So this one includes a definition of different maturity levels, and then, of course, the capacity building resources. Now, diving into these, sorry, just before I dive into these, I just wanted to also mention that we translated these into an interactive portal. So if you go to ds4scc.eu, you can actually click through this all this material and just review it for yourself. So this is actually the overarching idea of how the blueprint should look like. You can see on the top, those are the more non-technical ones, whereas the bottom one is the technical building blocks. And we actually rely on the use of minimal interoperability mechanisms to enable them. This has to be, however, updated. This is going to happen in June, but for you to know, we are considering here the foundational MIMs, which are accessing data, representing data, interlinking data, securing data, and sharing data. What is a MIM, though? Again, pointing to Martin here. I also work with this, so happy to explain. But Martin is definitely the brains behind this. Basically, the MIMs have been standardized. So there is a format what actually constitutes a MIM. So these are the different steps that you look through. It has a non-technical element and a technical element. So, first we talk about, like, we define a topic together with the community. Why do we even want to be interoperable in a certain topic? And then we list out, like, okay, but what are the capabilities and requirements to be interoperable in that topic? And once we have those, we can look around. What are the existing mechanisms that comply with those and the respective technical specifications? Of course, compliance and conformance testing so that you can make sure that you are doing the right thing. And then interoperability guidance across these mechanisms. This is actually quite helpful because you can, especially looking at the non-technical part, you can use it, for example, for procurement. And that is that's been proven to be helpful. Yeah, go for it, Martin, please.
Yep, just very, very quickly, linking to what Diana said, it would be helpful if we don't do standards that are impossible for existing systems to implement. And I think what has happened over the last decade is that some ideas have been tried out, as you say, first in a small test and then bigger pilots, and now it's pretty big pilots, right? And there's also, I don't know if you will mention it, but there was also be pilots on local digital twins in the same fashion as you just described now, right? So it's actually a very nice example of small ideas. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have something simple that everybody could use, then specialize? So this is actually then where the standardization and the projects, the research, and also the innovation plays nicely into these virtuous cycles. So Diana, just a nod to you, what you put forward. This is an attempt, I think, by the many communities that have been working together to then actually deliver on that, because otherwise it'll just be a lot of sectorized, very, very full, complete, but unfortunately very heavy standards, and probably they won't be implemented.
And maybe just to complement what you said is like also the feedback that we had regarding the MIMS, and it's actually, I think it's one of our first conversations with Martin, is like the diversity of environments when we talk about smart communities where these have to fit in. So really this minimal element is very appealing to many here. But let's dive into the different parts of how do we actually move forward with realizing a data space. So just simplifying the governance scheme itself. So this is a non-technical element. We try to position it as the why, what, who, how. Of course, you know, I mean, I think it's quite straightforward. We all know about this, but maybe this part is so I just don't want to waste on this. You will get the slides. But maybe just a moment here to reflect that, especially now we are in the process of revamping it, and we are thinking a lot about common ways to refer to the roles, to the rules, to the contracts and agreements. You know, should we develop a minimum viable product for contracts, for example? That's data quality assessment. You know, what are the consequences of not having that? So here, for example, we are still looking around for relevant solutions. When you look at the catalog of specifications on the left side, you can see all the bodies we try to align with here. Right side is the actual building blocks across the three avenues. Again, I would like to point out that the way we are actually representing them is that we say like, okay, this is the building block, for example, data models you would need, but we do accompany it. Like we did a research into like, okay, what are the related standards that can realize data models? What would be good for you to use? What are the related industry body specifications, reference implementations? What is the relevant MIM here for you? For example, if you wanted to procure it, and of course, in general, like what's the scope of this building block and what's the maturity level of it? An additional tool that I wanted to show in this environment is the data cooperation canvas. This is an upgrade of the business canvas. This has been developed or further evolved within our project together with the city of Amsterdam. So it comes from there. But this is also a way that we try to facilitate this multi-stakeholder environment, especially when we talk about data spaces. We have to get a lot of different stakeholders on one page, but also while the project is running or while the data space is running, you will want to show what you are doing to more stakeholders. So it's also, this is a very it's no brain surgery, but it's a quite handy tool in terms of just documenting what you have in a one-page overview, and you can really clearly communicate where you are at with your data space. Next steps, again, I think for this environment, it's probably interesting to know that we are revamping the data space blueprint itself, so the technical and non-technical elements, and we have a deadline for the 30th of June, so we are really under a lot of pressure right now. But we're also working towards a federation of these local pilots in the European environment, of course. So this is two different things that we have to do. And we are, in this context, looking at the data space support centers data blueprint for data spaces 2.0. We are looking at how to actually address the Data Act and the Interoperability Act, because on the one hand, we received from the pilots questions about the Data Act. On the other hand, the Interoperability Act actually says that local authorities have to do interoperability assessments. And in our experience working with the cities, they either don't know about it or they don't understand what they have to do. And this is a quite tricky situation for them right now. And obviously, we are in the position where we are compelled to respond to this. So we are also looking at this. Then there's Simple, the smart middleware that we would like to use in order to enable this federation. We are looking at, of course, standards work on the data spaces regarding the different building blocks. And ultimately, we still have to define what is the value created of the data space itself. Of course, there's a lot being said, but to really flesh it out, and this is helped by activities such as impact assessment or financial feasibility. Well, I hope I fit into the time. I try to cover a wide range of activities.
You certainly did, Sophie. Actually, everybody did today. Thank you very much to all the speakers who were bang on time today. So that's fantastic. That's really, thank you to everybody who finished spot on and on time. So thank you, Sophie. That was very interesting hearing the adoption of standards and the need to engage with the cities as well, which is really, really important. The element of stakeholder engagement in this whole process is very important. So I think I'd like, if you can do the virtual hand clap to all of the speakers today. That was really, really comprehensive and really, really very, very interesting from all of you. So thank you very much, because I think we've covered a lot of ground in terms of understanding the elements within the Data Act and and how the standardization request is based on, where it is based on, in particular in Article 33, and then moving forward to the actual, the technical committee which has been set up and which Sebastian is now leading with the help of people like Martin and the different working groups. And then, of course, this big pool of expertise from the EU project, how can they contribute? And we heard some useful insight and steps that projects can take from René, which I think is very important. And the first of a couple of tools, because Sophie there mentioned the data cooperation canvas, and René mentioned the standardization orientation tool, which I put the link to. These are important tools in terms of helping people to, move forward in a concerted way and in a standardized way, if you like. It's trying to get people to think in similar ways. So we had the practical examples of the physical world and the digital world as well from Martin, and the challenges that are the foundation to all of this work. And then, of course, the support which Diana and René gave on the practical application from Diana in terms of how an EU projects can get organized and be thinking about how which aspects of their projects are of interest to technical committees. And then, of course, Sophie's presentation at the end on the importance of also adopting the right standards too, and the activities of the different data spaces. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen really quickly. If I can't do this, I miraculously can almost. So I just wanted to repeat that there are, I'm not sure if I'm on full screen or not, but there are ways in which you can get funding to get involved with standardization activities. Stand ICT is one of those, which provides funding to individuals who can join technical committee activities and set up liaisons as well, and receive money to fund their effort in this area of work. Okay, so Stand ICT has regular calls, and the funding is available to individuals and also to companies. And then, of course, the HSbooster, as I mentioned, the mentoring services will continue in June. And it would be interesting, some of the projects which are working in this area, if we could hook them up with people like Sebastian or René and Diana and Martin, and, create this direct support so that projects can understand which of their results are relevant to that, to the technical committee, and where they could potentially contribute. So with that, once again, I'd like to thank everybody, all of our speakers and all of the participants who have stayed on for the full webinar. It was really, really very good. And thank you, everyone, once again. Have a lovely afternoon and evening. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.